For 32-year-old Sarah Martinez, life in Mesa, Arizona, seemed picture-perfect. She worked as a 911 dispatcher for the city's emergency services, a job that required her to remain calm under pressure and help save lives. She had married her high school sweetheart, Detective Marcus Thompson of the Mesa Police Department, and together they were raising their two young sons, Tyler and Brandon. Everyone who knew Sarah described her the same way: organized, efficient, and devoted to her family. But beneath this facade of suburban normalcy, something dark and calculated was brewing. And over the course of 6 years, two men who loved and trusted Sarah would die under eerily similar circumstances, their deaths separated by time, but connected by a common thread: a deadly poison administered by the woman they called their wife. Sarah Collins had been born and raised in Phoenix, the daughter of a construction worker and a dental hygienist. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood, graduating from Central High School in 1998 with average grades but big ambitions. She wanted stability, security, and a comfortable life. After high school, she took a job at a local retail store while attending community college part-time. It was at a friend's party in 1999 that she met Marcus Thompson. He was 24, a rookie police officer with the Mesa Police Department, ambitious and handsome in his uniform. Marcus was immediately drawn to Sarah's confidence and her easy smile. She seemed mature beyond her years, grounded and practical. They began dating, and within 6 months, Marcus was convinced he'd found his life partner. Friends said Marcus was head over heels in love. He talked constantly about building a future with Sarah, about having children, about growing old together. They married in June 2000 in a modest ceremony at a local chapel. Sarah wore a simple white dress. Marcus looked proud in his dress uniform, and their families celebrated what seemed like the perfect match. Sarah gave birth to their first son, Tyler, in March 2001, followed by Brandon in November 2002. Marcus was a devoted father and husband. He worked long hours at the police department, taking on extra shifts to provide for his growing family. Sarah had quit her retail job after Tyler was born, staying home with the children for the first few years. But by 2004, with both boys in daycare, she decided to return to work. She applied for a position as a 911 dispatcher with Mesa Emergency Services and was hired after passing the required training and background checks. It seemed like perfect fit for Sarah. The job paid well, offered good benefits, and had regular hours that allowed her to be home with her children in the evenings. She was good at her job too. Supervisors noted that she remained composed during emergency calls, never panicked, always followed protocol. She was the calm voice on the other end of the line when people were experiencing the worst moments of their lives. But by 2006, cracks were beginning to show in Sarah and Marcus's marriage. Marcus had been promoted to detective, which meant even longer hours and more stress. He was working major crimes, dealing with homicides and violent assaults, bringing the darkness of the job home with him. Sarah complained to friends that he was never around, that she felt like a single parent, that the spark had gone out of their marriage. But there was something else Sarah wasn't telling anyone. She had begun an affair with a co-worker at the 911 call center, a dispatcher named Ryan Garrett. Ryan was younger than Marcus, less serious, more attentive. He made Sarah feel desired in a way she hadn't felt in years. They began meeting secretly, stolen moments during breaks, texts and calls when Marcus was at work. Sarah told Ryan that her marriage was over emotionally, that she was only staying for the kids. But divorce wasn't something Sarah seriously considered. Marcus had a life insurance policy through the police department, a $150,000 policy that would pay out to Sarah in the event of his death. Additionally, the department provided death benefits for officers killed in the line of duty or who died from job-related causes. Sarah had started thinking about what her life could be like if Marcus were no longer in the picture. She'd be free, she'd have money, she could start over with Ryan. In October 2006, Sarah began researching antifreeze poisoning. Her internet search history, later recovered by digital forensics investigators, showed searches for ethylene glycol symptoms, antifreeze poisoning detection, how long does antifreeze stay in system, and life insurance payout after death. Ethylene glycol, the primary ingredient in automotive antifreeze, is a sweet-tasting liquid that, when ingested, is metabolized by the body into toxic compounds that cause severe metabolic acidosis, acute kidney failure, and death. Critically, in the early stages, The symptoms mimic the flu: nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, confusion. Most people don't suspect poisoning. Most doctors don't test for it, unless there's a specific reason to do so. Sarah, with her medical training from the 911 center and access to emergency medical protocols, would have understood exactly how antifreeze poisoning worked and how to make it look like a natural illness. On the evening of March 3, 2007, Marcus came home from work complaining of feeling unwell. He told Sarah he had a pounding headache and felt nauseous, like he was coming down with the flu. Sarah suggested he take some medicine and rest. She made him dinner, his favorite meal, a steak with mashed potatoes, and a large glass of sweet iced tea. Marcus ate dinner, commenting that the tea tasted a bit off, but Sarah assured him she'd just added extra sugar. Over the next several hours, Marcus's condition worsened rapidly. He became increasingly confused and disoriented. He vomited multiple times. His breathing became labored. By midnight, Sarah called 911, a call she made from her personal phone, not as a dispatcher, but as a panicked wife. She told the operator that her husband was a police detective and that something was terribly wrong. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Marcus was unresponsive, his vital signs critically unstable. He was rushed to Banner Desert Medical Center, but despite aggressive treatment, his organs were failing. Doctors worked frantically to stabilize him, but they couldn't identify what was wrong. His kidneys had shut down completely. His blood chemistry was catastrophically abnormal. Less than 24 hours after becoming ill, on March 4, 2007, Detective Marcus Thompson died. He was just 32 years old. The hospital listed the cause of death as acute renal failure due to unknown causes. Standard toxicology tests were performed, screening for common drugs and poisons, but they came back negative for everything tested. The medical examiner, faced with an otherwise healthy 32-year-old man who had suddenly died of kidney failure, ruled the death as natural causes, possibly related to an undiagnosed genetic kidney condition or an acute infection. Marcus's death was treated as a tragedy, not a crime. His fellow officers of the Mesa Police Department were devastated. More than 300 officers attended his funeral. Sarah played the role of the grieving widow perfectly. She wept at the service, held her 2 young sons close, and accepted condolences from Marcus's family and colleagues. She gave a eulogy describing Marcus as her soulmate, the love of her life, the best father their children could have asked for. Everyone believed her grief was genuine. No one suspected that she had poisoned him. Within weeks of Marcus's death, Sarah filed a claim for his $150,000 life insurance policy. She also received death benefits from the police department totaling another $50,000, bringing her payout to $200,000. For a woman who had been living paycheck to paycheck, it was a life-changing amount of money. She paid off debts, bought a new car, took her sons on a vacation to Disneyland. She continued working at the 911 call center, and her relationship with Ryan Garrett became more open. But by late 2007, Sarah's relationship with Ryan had cooled. He was fun for an affair, but Sarah had started to see him as immature, unreliable, not the kind of man she wanted to build a future with. And then, in January 2008, she met someone new. David Chen was a firefighter with the Phoenix Fire Department. He was 35, divorced with no children, financially stable, and looking for a serious relationship. He and Sarah met through a mutual friend at a barbecue. David was immediately drawn to Sarah's story, a young widow raising 2 boys alone after her police detective husband had died tragically. David saw her as strong, resilient, someone who had been through hardship and come out the other side. They began dating in February 2008. David was kind, attentive, and loved Sarah's sons. He would take them to baseball games, help with homework, play video games with them. By summer 2008, David had moved in with Sarah and the boys. And in December 2008, just over a year after they'd met, David and Sarah were married in a small ceremony in Sedona. Sarah's sons walked her down the aisle. David's family welcomed Sarah warmly. Everyone thought it was a beautiful second chance at happiness for both of them. But Sarah hadn't changed. By 2010, she was growing restless again. David worked 24-hour shifts at the fire station, which meant he was gone frequently. Sarah complained to friends that she felt like she was doing everything alone again, that David was always at work, that she was tired of being a caregiver. And there was another factor. David had taken out a life insurance policy when they got married, a $250,000 policy with Sarah as the sole beneficiary. He'd also updated his firefighter's benefits to list Sarah as his primary beneficiary, which included an additional $100,000 death benefit. Sarah had done the math. If David died, she would receive $350,000. Enough to be financially secure for years, enough to never have to worry about money again, enough to give her sons the best education, the best opportunities. In September 2010, Sarah's internet search history showed a familiar pattern. Searches for second husband sudden death suspicious. Can the same poison be detected twice? Symptoms of kidney failure and firefighter death benefits payout. She was planning again, calculating again, preparing to kill again. On the evening of January 15, 2011, David came home from a 24-hour shift at the fire station. He told Sarah he was exhausted and just wanted to relax. Sarah suggested they have a quiet dinner at home. She prepared his favorite meal, grilled chicken, rice, and vegetables, and made him a large glass of his favorite fruit punch. David ate dinner, and the two watched a movie together. He commented to Sarah that he felt unusually tired, more than just normal post-shift fatigue. She told him he'd been working too hard and should get some sleep. Over the next several hours, David's condition deteriorated. He began vomiting violently. He complained of severe abdominal pain and a crushing headache. He became increasingly confused, asking Sarah the same questions repeatedly, not remembering the answers. By 3 a.m., Sarah called 911. She told the dispatcher, one of her co-workers, that her husband was a firefighter and that something was seriously wrong. Paramedics arrived to find David in critical condition. His vital signs were unstable, his breathing shallow, his level of consciousness declining. He was transported to St. Joseph's Hospital and Medical Center, where doctors immediately recognized the severity of his condition. His kidneys were failing. His blood chemistry showed severe metabolic acidosis. The medical team worked around the clock to save him, but his organs continued to shut down. On January 17, 2011, just 48 hours after becoming ill, firefighter David Chen died. He was 38 years old. Once again, the hospital listed the cause of death as acute renal failure. Standard toxicology came back negative for common drugs and poisons. The medical examiner, reviewing David's case, noted that he was a physically fit firefighter with no known health problems, making his sudden death from kidney failure unusual. But without evidence of foul play, the death was ruled as natural causes, possibly related to an undiagnosed condition. David's fellow firefighters were shocked and grief-stricken. Sarah was once again the devastated widow. She wept at David's funeral, holding her sons as they said goodbye to the stepfather who had been so good to them. She gave another moving eulogy, talking about how David had brought light back into their lives after the tragedy of losing Marcus, how he had been a wonderful husband and father figure. The firefighting community rallied around her, raising money to help support the widow and her two boys. No one suspected a thing. But one person wasn't convinced. David's mother, David Chen, had never been entirely comfortable with Sarah. She couldn't put her finger on exactly what bothered her, but something about Sarah's grief seemed performative, calculated. And when Linda learned that Sarah had filed for David's life insurance policy within days of his death, just as she had with Marcus, alarm bells started ringing. Linda began asking questions. She learned that Sarah's first husband had also died suddenly of kidney failure just 4 years earlier, also completely unexpectedly, also ruled as natural causes. 2 husbands, both young and healthy, both dead from acute kidney failure within 4 years of each other. The odds seemed impossible. In March 2011, Linda Chen contacted the Phoenix Police Department and requested that they investigate her son's death. She explicitly stated her suspicion that Sarah had killed David, and possibly her first husband Marcus as well. Detective Jennifer Ramirez was assigned to the case. She began by reviewing the circumstances of both Marcus Thompson's and David Chen's deaths. The similarities were striking. Both had been young, healthy men. Both had died suddenly after experiencing flu-like symptoms that rapidly progressed to complete organ failure. Both had died of acute renal failure. Both had life insurance policies with Sarah as the beneficiary. Both deaths had occurred at home with Sarah present. Detective Ramirez requested that both cases be reviewed by a forensic pathologist. Dr. Michael Torres, a forensic pathologist with extensive experience in poisoning cases, reviewed the medical records and autopsy reports for both men. He immediately noted that the symptom progression and lab results were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, antifreeze. He recommended that tissue samples from both victims be tested specifically for ethylene glycol and its metabolites. This presented a challenge. Marcus Thompson had been dead for 4 years, buried in a cemetery in Mesa. David Chen had been dead for only 2 months, also buried. Detective Ramirez obtained court orders to exhume both bodies for advanced toxicological testing. In April 2011, both bodies were exhumed. Tissue samples were sent to a specialized forensic toxicology laboratory in California that had the capability to detect ethylene glycol metabolites even years after death. The results came back in May 2011. Both Marcus Thompson and David Chen had detectable levels of ethylene glycol metabolites in their tissue samples at concentrations consistent with lethal poisoning. Dr. Torres stated unequivocally that both men had been poisoned with antifreeze. These were not natural deaths. These were homicides. On June 2, 2011, Sarah Martinez was arrested at her workplace, the Mesa 911 call center, and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The arrest made national headlines. A 911 dispatcher, a woman whose job was to save lives, had allegedly poisoned 2 husbands to death for insurance money. Co-workers were stunned. Sarah's sons, now 10 and 8 years old, were placed in the temporary custody of Marcus Thompson's parents. Sarah was held without bond. During the investigation, detectives interviewed everyone in Sarah's life. They discovered the affair with Ryan Garrett, which established a motive for Marcus's murder. They uncovered Sarah's financial problems before both deaths and her spending sprees afterward. Most damning, forensic computer analysis revealed her extensive internet searches about antifreeze poisoning before each death. Prosecutors built an overwhelming case. Sarah had motive, hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance money, and the freedom to pursue other relationships. She had means, easy access to antifreeze, which can be purchased at any auto parts store, and the knowledge of how to administer in food or drink without detection. She had opportunity. She was alone with both victims when they ingested the poison. And she had established a pattern. 2 husbands, 2 identical methods, 2 identical outcomes. The prosecution argued that after successfully killing Marcus and getting away with it, Sarah had been emboldened to kill again. The trial began in March 2012. Prosecutor Elena Rodriguez presented the forensic evidence showing that both men had been poisoned with ethylene glycol. She presented Sarah's internet search history, showing clear premeditation. She presented testimony from Ryan Garrett about the affair, establishing Sarah's desire to be free of Marcus. She presented financial records showing Sarah's money problems before the deaths and her spending after receiving insurance payouts. She presented testimony from witnesses who said Sarah seemed unusually unemotional about her husband's deaths, despite her public displays of grief. Sarah's defense attorney argued that the deaths were coincidental, that ethylene glycol could have entered the victim's systems through environmental exposure, that there was no direct evidence Sarah had ever purchased antifreeze or administered it to anyone. But the jury didn't believe it. The pattern was too clear, the forensic evidence too compelling, the motive too obvious. On April 18, 2012, after deliberating for only 8 hours, the jury found Sarah Martinez guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Linda Chen wept with relief that justice had finally been served for her son. Marcus Thompson's parents held each other, grateful that the woman who had killed their son and destroyed their family would be held accountable. At sentencing, both families delivered powerful victim impact statements. Marcus's father described his son as a dedicated police officer who had devoted his life to protecting others, only to be betrayed and murdered by the woman he loved and trusted most. Linda Chen described David as a caring man who had opened his heart to Sarah and her children, only to be poisoned and killed for insurance money. The judge called Sarah's crimes among the most calculated and cold-blooded murders I have encountered in my career. He noted that she had not only killed 2 innocent men, but had orphaned her own children and destroyed multiple families. Sarah Martinez was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. As of 2024, Sarah Martinez remains incarcerated at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville. She has maintained her innocence and filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. Her sons Tyler and Brandon were raised by Marcus Thompson's parents. Neither son has had any contact with their mother since her arrest. The insurance companies successfully fought the claims and never paid out the policies for David Chen's death. Marcus Thompson's payout, which Sarah had already received and spent, was recovered through civil forfeiture and asset seizure, with funds being placed in a trust for his sons. The case prompted changes in how sudden deaths of young, healthy individuals are investigated, with medical examiners now more routinely testing for ethylene glycol poisoning in unexplained cases of acute kidney failure. Sarah's case serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the people we trust most, the people we share our homes with, our lives with, our futures with, can be the ones who pose the greatest danger. Marcus Thompson and David Chen both loved Sarah completely, trusted her implicitly, and believed they were building futures with her. Neither man could have imagined that the woman preparing their meals, caring for their home, sleeping beside them each night, was slowly and deliberately poisoning them to death. For Sarah Martinez, love was never real. It was always transactional, calculated, a means to an end. And when that end was financial gain and personal freedom, she was willing to kill, not once, but twice, without remorse, without hesitation, without conscience.